Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Welcome to this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class. It's from Canto 2, Chapter 3, and today we're doing text 20. So without any further ado, we'll start the class. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Ivadaptari Gopi Janavallabha Ivadaptari Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Janaballabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Janaballabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajikacharya Stottara Satsya Maharaj Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Lila Vishnu Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajikacharya Stottara Satsya Maharaj Divine Grace Shri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnav Ki Jai Lama Acharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai इसका फाउंड आचार्य श्री प्रभुपाद की जय प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवाचार्य गौर भक्तवृंद की जय श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोपी गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय वृंदावन धाम की जय मथुरा धाम मथुरा धाम की जय नवद्वीप धाम की जय मायापुर धाम की जय जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय जगन्नाथ स्वामी की जय गंगा माई की जय जमुना माई की जय तुलसी देवी की जय भक्ति देवी की जय सामवेद भक्तविंद की जय हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय निताय गौर भवनंदे हरि हरि बोल all glories to the assembled devotees Hare Krishna all glories to the assembled devotees Hare Krishna all glories to the assembled devotees Hare Krishna all glories to the Lord's feet of Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prashnaya, Bhutale, Srimati Bhakti, Swami Tinavati. Namaste, Krishna Padaya, Bhasta, Sri Gauranga, Shakti, Bhakti, Oh God, Shri Prabhupada. Narayana Namaskricha, Narunchevam, Naruttamam, Devim Saraswati Vyasam, Tato Jayam Vadirayat, Nasya Praisva Bhadresu, Nityam Bhagavata Sivaya, Bhavadutamastloke Bhaktir Naistiki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Hare Krishna. So today's text, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 3, and Text 20. So we'll sing it 3 times, and then anyone who feels inclined to can sing. Vile baturu krama vikramanye nashrin nashrin vata kana pute narasya vivasati dha durike vasuta nacho pagaya tyaurga ya gata. Vile baturu krama vikramanye nashrin vatakana pute narasya vivasati dadurike vasuta nacho pagaya yatyurugaya gata. Vile baturu krama vikram Vile baturu krama vikramanye Nashrinvata kana pute narasya. Ivasati dadurike vasuta. Nachopagatia. Nachopagaya Tyurgaya Gata. Hare Krishna.
Go ahead. Oh, I thought someone was chanting before me.
No, go ahead.
Vile vaturu krama vikramanye nashrin vatakarna pute narasya jiva sati dardor ke vasuta nacho pagayatyu rugaya gata. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Anyone else? Okay, word for word. Vile, snake holes. Vata, like. Urukrama, the Lord who acts marvelously. Vikraman, prowess. Ye, all these. Na, never. Shrinvata, heard. Karnapute, the ear holes. Narasya, of the man. Jiva, tongue. Asati, useless. Dadurika, of the frogs. Eva, exactly like that. Sutta, Sutta Goswami. Na, never. Cha, also. Upagayati, chants loudly. Urugaya, worth singing. Gatha, songs. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. One who has not listened to the messages about the prowess and marvelous acts of the personality of Godhead and has not sung or chanted loudly the worthy songs about the Lord is to be considered to possess ear holes like the holes of snakes and the tongue like the tongue of a frog. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Devotional service to the Lord is rendered by all limbs or parts of the body. It is a transcendental dynamic force of the spirit soul. Therefore, a devotee is engaged 100% in the service of the Lord. One can engage in devotional service when the senses of the body are purified in relation with the Lord, and one can render service to the Lord with the help of all the senses. As such, the senses and the action of the senses are to be considered impure or materialistic as long as they are employed only in sense gratification. As such, the senses and the action of the senses are to be considered impure or materialistic as long as they are employed only in sense gratification. The purified senses are engaged not in sense gratification, but in the service of the Lord in total, which means completely. The Lord is the supreme with all senses, and the servitor who is part and parcel of the Lord also has the same senses. Service to the Lord is a completely purified use of the senses as described in the Bhagavad Gita. The Lord imparted instructions with full senses, and Arjuna received them with full senses. And thus, there was perfect exchange of sensible and logical understanding between the master and the disciple. Spiritual understanding is nothing like an electrical charge from the master to the disciple, as foolishly claimed by some propaganda mongers. Everything is full of sense and logic, and the exchange of views between the master and disciple is possible only when the reception is submissive and real. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that one should receive the teaching of Lord Chaitanya with intellect and full senses so that one can logically understand the great mission. In the impure state of a living being, the various senses are engaged in mundane are fully engaged in mundane affairs. Hmm. If the ear is not engaged in the service of the Lord by hearing about him from Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, certainly the holes of the ear will be filled with some rubbish. Therefore, the messages of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam should be preached all over the world very loudly. That is the duty of a pure devotee who has actually heard about them from the perfect sources. Many want to speak something to others, but because they're not trained to speak on the subject matter of Vedic wisdom, they are all speaking nonsense. And people are receiving them with no sense. There are hundreds and thousands of sources for distributing mundane news of the world, and people of the world are also receiving it. Similarly, the people of the world should be taught to hear the transcendental topics of the Lord. And the devotee of the Lord must speak loudly so that they can hear. The frogs loudly croak, with the result that they invite the snakes to eat them. The human tongue is especially given for chanting the Vedic hymns and not for croaking like frogs. The word asati used in this verse is also significant. Asati means a woman who has become a prostitute. A prostitute has no reputation for good womanly qualities. Similarly, the tongue which is given to the human being for chanting Vedic hymns will be considered a prostitute when engaged in chanting some mundane nonsense. Oma Gyanati Vidandasya Gyana Gyana Shavakaya Chakshu Militam Gyana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Vidanti Swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Palaya Krishna Prashnaya Bhutale Srimadi Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauramani Pacharini Nirvishesha Sunyavari Paschatya Deshajayami Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadaha Shiva Shari Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. So the English translation of the text is, one who has not listened to the messages about the prowess and marvelous acts of the personality of Godhead, and has not sung or chanted loudly the worthy songs about the Lord, is to be considered to possess ear holes like the holes of snakes, and a tongue like the tongue of a frog. So, yesterday's text, which is the text before this one, talked about people behaving like dogs, hogs, camels, and asses. Behavior. Now, in this text, following it with the fact that one needs to listen to the messages about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is critical that one does that. Very important. If we leave that out, we will not be excited about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there's always the importance for us not to miss out on hearing transcendental topics of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Transcendental topics include his pastimes, two categories, pastimes and instructions. The instructions come first because the instructions help us to identify the Supreme Personality of Godhead to a decent extent. We say in decent extent because we can't identify the Lord fully. He is unlimited. But Srila Prabhupada said, a devotee should know this much. And what is this much? Krishna's to Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If you like the way Lord Brahma put it, he put it like this: Ishvara Parama Krishna. The Supreme Controller is Krishna. He describes Krishna's body, Satchidananda, eternal. The Lord never dies, full of knowledge, knows everything about everything, and is always happy, full of bliss. Whether he's dancing with the gopis or killing the demons, he's still, as the Prabhupada, he's still smiling. Hmm? So the Lord is to be heard about. That should be our business. Hmm? The pure devotees, their life air literally is in Krishna. As in the manner of speaking, because we are all part and parcels of Krishna. So even the life air is contained in Krishna, in that sense. The thoughts of the devotees dwell in Krishna. Why? Because they always talk about Krishna. They discuss topics about Krishna. Mm-hmm. And they can do it in terms of having a general discussion or having one person like Sutta Goswami speaking to 80,000, the congregation of those very eager to hear Adnami Sharanya. One person speaking, the rest hearing, then they asking questions, which is basically the format that we follow, or there's a general discussion about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which we also do, but we do it informally, like talking about Krishna and talking about service over Prasadam, for example, when we congregate like that. The pure devotees do that all the time. They like to hear transcendental topics. If you're going to tell a pure devotee anything material, they're going to say, yes, you can say so as long as you tie it to Krishna consciousness. Then we're ready to hear. Then we're ready to hear. Hmm? Part of Maharaj Parikshit's activities was material. But the sages in Naimisharanya wanted to hear. They said, as long as he's connected with Krishna. He was in the forest. He was hungry. This is Maharaj Pariksit. He was hungry. He was thirsty. He came to the ashram of Shamakrishi. He put a dead snake later on the garlanding Shamakrishi because Shamakrishi refused to receive him. He was in meditation and he did not want to break his meditation. Now, all of these things, there's nothing spiritual about that. All of these are material things. But because after the curse by Shringi, Shamakrishi's son, Bhavatam was to come in the picture, then the devotees wanted to hear it because it would get to a point where now Shukadeva Goswami would speak Srimad Bhavatam to Maharaj Pariksit on account of the way things unfolded from when he was tired, when he was thirsty. Now, Maharaj Pariksit, he was being given the chance to go back to the spiritual world. This was a plan that Krishna put into place. So he behaved through the plan uncharacteristically, but it was Krishna's plan, and Krishna doesn't make any mistakes. Mm-hmm. So that was the plan to get him to go back to Godhead. That was the plan. And he was also going to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, Madhavi Gurangi Mataji made one point that was so striking the other day when she was preaching. He made a point, and this very much connects with hearing transcendental topics, the need. The point she made was Maharaj Pariksit was thirsty when he went to Shamaka's residence, ashram, or his little kutir, to get some water. The same Maharaj Pariksit could have been thirsty easily for 7 days. But when he was hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, he didn't say anything about wanting to eat or wanting to drink some water. The same personality, Maharaj Pariksit. When he was in the forest, that was one thing. But when he was hearing the transcendental topics of the Supreme Personality of God, he didn't care about wanting water then. The same personality. Mataji made that point, and that was very striking. Mm-hmm. So here in Transcendental Topics of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it gives such joy. And those pure devotees who are in the level of Krishna Prema, when they hear, there are two levels of Krishna Prema that describes this. The first one is, in fact, the very first of the seven ladder, the rungs of the ladder of devotional, Prema to the Lord, and that is Sneha. Sneha is the first level after one comes to Krishna Prema. There's Sneha, Mana, which is higher, Pranaya, that's higher still, Raga, that's higher still, Anuraga, that's higher still, Bhava, that's higher still, and then the last one, Mahabhav, 7 of them. At a Sneha level, it is described, this is from Gogovinda Maharaj's lectures, that the heart becomes very light, feathery. So it's like Balaram has actually taken his plow and made the soil of the heart so receptive to hearing the transcendental topics, growing the Bhakti Lata. It also becomes bright. So Gogovinda Maharaj is describing it that way, and he says a person that is at that level, when they hear the Supreme Personality of Godhead topics about him, they want to get millions and millions of ears to hear the topics of the Lord. That is the feeling that they get. Now, in the fifth level, which is called the Anuraga level, a person that hears transcendental topics about the Supreme Personality of Godhead wishes to hear the same pastime or the same discussion over and over and over and over again. First one, Sneha, means they wish they had so many years to hear. That is the Sneha level. And the Anuraga level, each topic about the Supreme Personality of Godhead that they hear, a person in the Krishna Prema level, after they hear, it becomes newer and newer and newer. The same thing being said becomes newer and newer. So if you look at it from the mundane standpoint, the same thing is being repeated. How can it become newer? It is the realization and the awakening of the heart, specifically the soul's connection to the transcendental topic. That makes it come across newer and newer and newer, even though it is the same subject matter being talked about. This is the marvelous quality of hearing the transcendental topics, how it affects those who are at the Krishna Prema level. Now, we're talking about that because we are all aspiring to get to the Krishna Prema level. Krishna Prema is not for some people, and then some people could never get to Krishna Prema. If that was the case, why would Lord Chaitanya come to chant the holy name and induce others to chant the holy name and give Krishna Prema from the holy name? One can get to the Krishna Prema level chanting intensely the Hare Krishna mantra, giving their full heart to him, because it's about Radha and Krishna. The mantra is about Radha and Krishna, wanting to be the servant of the servant of the servant of Radha and Krishna. One who is in love with Krishna wants to serve. Those of us following the Sadhana Bhakti, we're just being instructed, you do like this, you do like this, you prevent this, or you stop doing this other thing. So we're just being cleaned up. And then at some point of repetition, it becomes a habit. And then from the habit, we begin to like it. Now, we begin to like it because Krishna opens our hearts, not that we have such a great capability. The heart, which is now covered with all kinds of material things, that does not allow us to connect with Krishna and Krishna's devotees in love, now begins to open up. So the repetition of service makes us like that. It becomes a habit, and now we want to do it. So Papa gave one example about a young child, time to go to school. They don't want to go to school. They like being at home with mommy and daddy or playing with their friends. That's what they really would like to do. But if the parents or the guardians insist that the child go to school, literally giving the child no alternative but to go to school, after a while, they'll go to school automatically. This is the Papa's example. That is the case with us also. First, the service may taste like mango that's not ripe, bitter. But after taking, and chanting, the mango begins to ripen. Now we begin to like it. First, it's a habit, then we begin to like it. And that happens in all aspects of devotion service, including hearing the transcendental topics of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And quite frankly, you are an example of that. How come you come every day, the same places, same login to here? You've got to the point where it's become either a habit or you're beginning to like it. That is the place that you're at, that everybody is at. Hmm? That's why the same places show up. Hmm? Well, in a manner of speaking, electronically, but you come because you want to hear. Nobody's forcing you. Hmm? So the power of hearing is so. Anyway, see, Papa said this, of the 9 processes, chanting is most important, but hearing is the first thing. When you get guided, it is through hearing what to do. Sometimes it's also through watching. This is done this way, that's done this way. But you hear what to do. And then with somebody that's got experience, you can watch them and follow like that and then learn. So it is important to hear topics about Krishna, especially the ones that clean our hearts. There's pastimes of the Lord's activities. And once you hear the pastimes of the Lord's activities, you're really not going to want to hear anything mundane. After a while, it has that effect on us. So, one who has not listened to the messages about the prowess and marvelous acts of the personality of Godhead, the prowess and marvelous acts. This is one example. 7 years old Krishna lifts Govardhan Hill, holds it for 7 days with the smallest finger of his left hand. Now, that is showing his prowess, and the act itself is marvelous. Now, this happened because Krishna wanted to purify the mind of Indra, who had become so attached to pujas, worship, pujas to him, that the residents of Vrindavan were giving. And Krishna changed that and said, do puja to Govardhan Hill instead. Indra took exception to it and decided that he was going to use what had been given to him. That's not his power. What had been given to him by Krishna, that he could bring serious torrents of rain anywhere. He wants to use that to literally kill the residents of Vrindavan. He started it. There was thunder. There was lightning. He himself was a thunderbolt. The place was flooding very quickly. The residents turned to Krishna. You asked us to do this whole wonderful program for Govardhan Hill, and now Indra is doing this to us. We know that is because we didn't do the puja for him. He's turned against us like that. What to do? Krishna says, you follow me. He went to Govardhan Hill and lifted Govardhan Hill. lifted Govardhan. It's easy to say lifted Govardhan. Anybody here would challenge you, try to lift even one tree on Govardhan Hill, much less the whole mountain himself. But he lifted it easily. And he held it up and he asked the residents to come. And so they got underneath Govardhan Hill to shade them and protect them from the waters, the floods, and the horrible, horrible weather change that Indra had caused. Now, two things were happening. Govardhan Hill was being touched by the finger of Krishna. And so Govardhan Hill was in great ecstasy. And whatever Indra threw at the surface of Govardhan Hill did not affect Govardhan Hill at all. That's one. And secondly, the residents of Vrindavan were under Govardhan Hill getting the darshan of Krishna, Krishna and Balaram. So all the parents were there, the cowherd boys were there, the gopis were there. They're all under Govardhan Hill being protected. And then one may think that, well, but there is rain falling and rain can flow, water can flow. So couldn't it have flown right under Govardhan Hill and at least made their feet wet? Could that have happened? The answer is no, it didn't. Why? Because Krishna arranged that too. Without those under the Govardhan Hill realizing what was going on, he sent Ananta. Who's an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Anantasesh. So Anantasesh coiled around Govardhan Hill. Anantasesh is big. Therefore, no water was allowed at the bottom of Govardhan Hill. And then he started dealing with the flooding, Krishna, by sending the Sudarshan Chakra. And Sudarshan Chakra's heat was vaporizing all of that flood. Now, Krishna is marvelous. That's why it says, one who has not listened to the messages and the prowess, the messages about the prowess and marvelous acts of the personality of Godhead. He used the size of Anantasesh to block any flooding that could have happened under Govardhan Hill. And he also used Sudarshan Chakra, the very loyal servant of the Lord, to start vaporizing the water, the floods. And the Sudarshan Chakra vaporized it faster than Indra could pour water to flood the place. So over a short period of time, relatively short period of time, the water had actually been reduced, the flood. The height of the flood had been reduced. It was going down, 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 down. In the meantime, the residents were having a wonderful darshan with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, he is absolutely gorgeous. To just look at him. It's so wonderful. And they got to see him 7 days straight. Now, this is what was going on in Vrindavan. This is aside from this Govardhan pastime of the Lord. Every day, the Krishna book describes this, every day, when Krishna is going home after being with his friends, the cowherd boys, just walking to Mother Yashoda's house, to his house, where Mother Yashoda and Nanda take care of him. Just walking down. The cowherd boys go to their homes. But the cowherd girls would look through the windows to see Krishna passing by. They were so magnetized with how handsome Krishna was that every day they would look at him like that. He's here, he's at this point, he's at this point. And they're watching him. They were so magnetized to him. What would they not do for him? Hmm? Anything he asks them to do, they would do. This should be the attitude of devotees towards service. Hmm? So devotional service to the Lord, Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, is rendered by all limbs or parts of the process. Okay, well, let's go down. This go downhill pastime. Let's put it to the end. So Sudarshan Chakra evaporated the flood. It got to the point where it was clear that Sudarshan Chakra was evaporating the waters faster than Indra could do anything about it. Give him more water. So he gave up. Indra, gave up because it got to the point where any water that falls to the ground was immediately evaporated by Sudarshan Chakra. So then he gave up. Hmm? Hmm. And now he came to beg pardon from the Lord. He realized his mistake of trying to kill the residents of Vrindavan. He came to beg. Krishna was annoyed with what he had done. And so at first, Krishna even ignored him. Indra had to go to a personality or one of the living entities that Krishna is so fond of, and that's the Surabhi cow. So Indra went and made his case to Surabhi and said, I have offended Krishna. Can you please go with me and beg forgiveness on my behalf to Krishna? So this is how, because there's a little more to it, but this is how Krishna finally listened. And then told him, it's about your ego. And I cut it down to size in the manner of speaking. The pastimes of the Lord are wonderful. So devotional service, Prabhupada said, it has to be rendered by all parts of the body, all the limbs. So it is, in fact, devotional service is a transcendental dynamic force of the spiritual soul. So a devotee should be engaged 100% in the service of the Lord. When the devotee starts that serving, and then at some point they say, "Oh, I'm going to do this other thing," and it's material, and therefore they drop the service, then they're not understanding one thing. Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, Text 6 states it clearly. Savai punsam parodharmo yato bhakti ahoktade. Ahoitiki apatiyata. Ahoituki. You shouldn't want something or pay back some sort of remuneration for the service. Apatiyata. Patiyata means blockage, impediment. Apatiyata, no blockage, no impediment. So no one should actually get to the point where they feel, oh, in a manner of speaking, I'm allowing Maya to come in. As soon as you give a material reason for not doing service, you have allowed Maya into your life. That's exactly what happens. Don't do service. And what happens actually is there are so many people whose hearts are out there also wanting to do service. So if a person stops doing service for a material reason, that service will be replaced by somebody else. And that happens 100% of the time in all the temples in ISKCON. If you give a good excuse, the service stays. If you give a lame excuse, the service goes to someone else. And now your spiritual credits are cut off. So if you want your spiritual credits to be less, don't do any service or reduce the service. If you want more, and Krishna is happy with the service you do, you will get more. But Krishna is happy with the services that we're performing. The reward for service, good service, is more service. More service means more spiritual credits. And more spiritual credits is Krishna is happy with us, Guru is happy with us. The chances of going back to spiritual world is greatly increased. Krishna makes the final decision as to who goes back home. But if you put your heart to serve more, then sure. And so we have to be careful. This is a wonderful opportunity given to everybody. Service is very important. You can't say it enough. Hmm? It helps to purify our senses. Service to the Lord. It's the completely purified use of the senses. Anything else is a mundane use of the senses. Although sometimes some things we do with the senses are material, but they're necessary to maintain the body together. Hmm? The tongue, you have to eat, and we eat that way. Therefore, we put, and even that is spiritualized food, Krishna Prashadam. Hmm? Senses are purified. The tongue gets purified. The tongue gets purified when we talk about Krishna and not mundane subject matter, which is in the category of gossip. Nectar of instruction tells we should stay away from it. Hmm? Prajapa. So this is when we're doing service, we're purifying our senses at the same time, and we're piling spiritual credits. And Krishna is becoming happy with us. Hmm? So it is to our advantage. Hmm? We should use the full senses. It is also, Sri Prabhupada says, that it's stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita. One should receive the teaching of Lord Chaitanya with all zeal and intellect and full senses. We should understand it. It makes sense logically. It makes sense in every way. Hmm? It is the highest knowledge. And if we don't hear, then the holes of the ear will be filled with Prajapa, which is another category of rubbish. It doesn't help us. Hmm? When we speak about Krishna. Otherwise, we're just croaking like frogs. Hmm? And frogs croak loudly with the result that the snakes hear the loud croaking and they can tell where the croaking is coming from. They know the frog is there. All they have to do is just head that in that direction and they'll be able to catch the frog and eat the frog. So frogs croak with the result that they get eaten. They identify where they are. Hmm? And when people speak about mundane things, they are immersed in Maya. And in that case, the material energy, in the matter of speaking, eats us up. We don't get a chance to go back to Godhead. Mm-hmm. Even Srila Prabhupada describes very, very strong ways of the speaking mundane or speech of mundane things, speech involving mundane things. He calls the tongue a prostitute. Mm-hmm. No good qualities. The tongue does not have any good qualities if it only talks about mundane things. And we've had experience of that before. When I was teaching in college, usually at the beginning of a semester, there is a gathering of the faculty and the new students and so on. And then there's new students, welcome to the university. And then there's a speech given by someone, member, maybe the president, somebody in authority. And I used to sit through this. I started my devotional life. I was about 5, 6 years. Yeah, about 6 years into devotional service, living in Gideonagri. And I have to say with this because I was one of the faculty members. Sit and hear this. It was very painful to hear basically something that does not make any sense at all from a spiritual standpoint. There's one thing after another that's being talked about. Hmm? And the person thinks that they are really, really, really describing what the students would benefit from. But to a devotee, it was all very difficult to kind of take, to put it mildly. So hearing is important. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, Transcendental Knowledge, text 27, is the section of the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, hearing is the basic principle for understanding. So a pure devotee of a Lord, whatever ashram they're in, especially they was at that time referring to brahmacharis especially, but it actually is applicable to everybody. For purity, we engage fully in Hari Namanu Kirtanam, chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord. And a pure devotee, even one that's practicing to be that, would restrain himself from material sounds. Only engaging themselves in hearing the transcendental sound of the Hare Krishna mantra. Yes, there are processes of devotion, 9 of them, to develop love. And it's in Srimad Bhagavatam, but also in Bhagavad Gita, a section of the purport of 9.1, most confidential knowledge, chapter 9, text 1. Srila Prabhupada says, hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, worshiping, praying, obeying, maintaining friendship, and surrendering everything. Those are the 9 processes. Hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, chanting His holy name, remembering the Lord, just like Prahlad Maharaj did, serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, worshiping with Archana, and praying, Vandanam, and obeying, which is another way of saying becoming Krishna's servant. Servants obey the masters, obeying, becoming Krishna's friend. And that friend is a love connection, maintaining friendship and surrendering everything, because whatever you do, yat karosi, yat asnasi, yat juhosi dadasi yat, whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you do, and whatever you eat, whatever you offer, do it as an offering. Think of Krishna first. Do it for Krishna, because by that we develop love, and that transcendental reciprocation, the Lord loving us back, will be felt in all aspects of our life. Then our hearts will be cleared of material contamination. Then we can understand the science of Krishna. It is also important, in the very next text, Bhagavad Gita chapter 9, text 2, Srila Prabhupada is saying, when we hear, we also should teach what we've heard. If one engages not only in hearing, but also trying to broadcast a message of devotional service on top of that, or if the person engages himself in activities for Krishna consciousness, missionary activities, being out there, like the people who are doing, the devotees who are giving prasadam in the war zones, Ukraine for one. Ukrainian devotees are going out, knowing very well that any one of them could die at any time. But they were fearless because they were under the protection of Krishna, and they were supplying Krishna prasadam. Everyone that eats would either become a devotee this life or the next life, but they will definitely take birth as a human being. It would not go to any animal or bird or fish or tree or those kind of life, insect life, no. So it's very important. And finally, if we hear and explain it to other devotees, then pure devotional service is guaranteed. And at the end of life, the person who hears and speaks about it will come to him. That is in Bhagavad Gita. Come to him, Krishna, that is. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, text 68. And Krishna emphasizes it. There is no servant in the world more dear to me than he, nor will there ever be one more dear. Because talking about Krishna, for those who will hear, who didn't know about Krishna, but those who will hear and get excited about hearing, they come close to Krishna. They start their journey on the path, the royal path of devotion, back home, back to Godhead. And that's what Krishna wants. Krishna doesn't want us to stay in this jail forever. He wants us to go back. To go back and be away from all the anxieties caused by life in the material world. So we should hear, we should study, we should also share what we hear, and that way we will please Guru, we will please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and definitely the persons that hear will also be educated. It is not for just one person to speak all of the time. Anybody can talk about what their realization is in the Supreme Personality of Godhead's topics. Just one condition, one caution. Don't contaminate it with things that are not part of what Krishna has said. Do not contaminate it. That's different from giving examples. But the bottom line statement should always be based on what's in the Shastra. Hmm? That is very important. That way, then you become an instructing master to the person that is hearing. So it is important, just like this text says today, that we should not miss out on hearing transcendental topics of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it's even more important, we should apply the instructions part of it in our life. The activities will definitely excite us, activities of Krishna, but the instructions we have to use in serving the Lord. And that way we'll become happier. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Thank you very much for hearing. And this is the time to unmute yourself if you have any questions, if you have some realizations that you want to ask or share. Now, so please unmute yourself if you feel so inclined. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. Always Shri Prabhupada. I'm using Rajagopi's phone because
I see that.
I missed a little bit of the class because I was driving, but I wanted to ask you, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in the translation or the purport, the Prabhupada touched upon frogs, right?
Yeah.
Can you shed some light on that? I think I may have missed it, but can you shed some light of what was Prabhupada referring to in terms of the frogs that he was talking in the verse? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So the verse itself, when he mentioned frogs, I'll read the whole translation. One who has not listened to the messages about the prowess and marvelous acts of the personality of Godhead and has not sung or chanted loudly the worthy songs about the Lord. They have not listened to it and they have not sung it or chanted about the Lord, is to be considered, that kind of person is to be considered to possess ear holes like the holes of snakes and a tongue like the tongue of a frog. So this is how it started. The ear holes of snakes, when the snakes, their hearing is not so great. And a tongue like frog, what do the frogs do? They croak. And actually, not only is the croaking not wonderful in any sense of the whole word, but it is also a dangerous thing that the frogs do because the snake can, in fact, from the vibrations of the frog, get to where the frog is and literally have the frog as a meal. So those who have not listened to the messages about the prowess and the wonderful acts of the personality of Godhead is to be looked like a person who has the ear holes of snakes. Not so great. A person who has not sung and chanted loudly the worthy songs about the Lord, including the mantra, Hare Krishna mantra, has not used their tongues properly, just like the frogs just simply croak, making funny noises, and then finally they pay for it by being eaten by snakes. So that's what was being discussed from the translation. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Any other questions, comments, or realizations, connecting dots if you want? Okay, we're pretty much in the top of the hour now. So thank all of you for coming on to hear, keep hearing. The first thing to do, that's what Srila Prabhupada says. The first thing is to hear. The most important is to chant. So anyone here who has not started chanting, start chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. If you have time in the morning, that is the best time. Early in the morning is better. Go to bed early, wake up early, and start, wash your body, then start chanting. It's always helpful that way. Always think of Krishna. Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpatarubhishta kripasindhve chaptitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vaishnav Thakur ki jai. Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Glory to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Glory to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Glory to Srila Prabhupada. It's good to see you, man. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.